Now I'd like to call Norm Hall from APAS, Cam Goff, the chair of Sask Barley Development, and Bill Gell, chair of Sask Wheat Development Commission. They'll have a couple comments about the day and their submission to the CTA. They might even ask you for some suggestions as to what we should do going forward. Bill and Norm and Cam. There's Norm.
Thanks, Dan. I'll start while the other two are coming up. Well, there we are. Just want to talk a little bit about the principles around which we formed our submission. On August 16th, was actually Dale had asked us to bring together some farm groups to talk to the CTA about continuing the minimum requirements. And we figured, well, if we're bringing all those guys in for that, let's talk to them about the submission. So we sent out an invitation to all the farm groups in the province, and we had it was either 9 or 10 show up in Regina on October 16th. And we started discussing the principles around which we would form a submission. And there are four principles that we came up with, and these are the four. Competition was one of the first things we talked about, and with the duopoly, how good is competition? So although we talked about deregulating or regulating, there needs to be, in a duopoly, competition doesn't really work. So you need to introduce artificial competition, and that becomes regulation. We talked about market transparency, and that's been talked about today. Finding out what the real cost or what the real selling price is, what the real export margin is, and how to get all that information back to you guys on your farm so you can make proper marketing decisions. Because in an open market, information is key, and those that have the information make the gold, and it's those of us who don't have that information lose the gold. Grain transportation system must be forward-looking and positioned for growth. We've got a storied history with the railroads and transportation in the Western Canada and grain transportation, and so we have to use that windshield that I was talking about earlier. We need to focus on the future. Remind us of the past with that small mirror, but you can't focus on that mirror. You have to focus forward. And primary grain producers need their interests represented in the design and ongoing operations of the grain transportation system. Something that's always said around the APAS table is if you're not at the table, you're probably on the menu. And I can guarantee you that the railroads are not speaking for us. The Western Grain Elevators Association is not speaking for us. We have to be at that table. And it's been said many times that we are very unique when it comes to grain marketers and sellers of product, because we bear the cost of the inefficient system, and we don't have a direct relationship with the freight service providers. So we need to have a voice at the table. And that was the theme of the group of 9 that was around the table on October 16th. And then it was Sask Wheat, Sask Barley, and Sask Pulse that decided to go ahead with the project over the next 6 weeks and put forward the position of your voice. So for a little more details, I'll ask who's coming up next. Cam?
Okay. Well, there we go. I'd just like to
mention to you that we're keeping this brief because we really hope that we're going to have some input from this room later on to, right after we're finished. And also just to remind you, as Greg Northy's slide showed, that this is going to be a long process. While the actual CTA review will be finished this year, and the present, the report given to the government, it's not actually going to be decided for probably a year or more before legislation actually comes down. So over that time, we're going to need input from producers to make sure that we are actually speaking for you and that you're happy with what we're taking forward to government. But basically, the things that we think are important are the completion of an actual costing review, and then, if necessary, an adjustment to the maximum revenue entitlement. We have to know if the railways are being underpaid, if they're being overpaid, or if everything is just right. Farmers don't mind paying what it costs to get their product to market, but they want to make sure that we're not being overcharged. I think we need an independent assessment of the cost of moving grain so that we know what's fair. And we have to have that review process being ongoing, because we can't wait 17 years until the next costing review, and that's how long it's been. It's supposed to be every 4 years, but that sort of fell off the table. We also think that we need the maintenance of the maximum grain revenue entitlement. The MRE has to be maintained with periodic adjustments to ensure that we're paying a fair price. Everybody seems to agree that mandatory information reporting for grain handling and the transportation system has to be done in order for it to be functioning effectively. It's just like if you're on your individual farm, you have to have a handle on what's happening. It's impossible for you to make proper adjustments on your own authorization to ensure maximum efficiency if you do not know what your costs are. So therefore, that information that is out there has to be available to farmers and available to the whatever agency is actually helping with logistics, if that's what ends up being put forward. So we just have to know what's going out there, and to know that we have to have the information given to us. So that's my part, and I'm looking forward to input from you, both at this meeting and also later on during the process. And here's Bill Gale.
How do we move this ahead? The right one? Yeah. There we go. Thank you. Okay, I guess thanks everybody. Certainly, I think at Sask Wheat we thought this was a very important process, and we are very proud to be part of the coalition here today, bringing you this information. I think, again, back to some of the things that Norm has said, I think farmers are very unique in this situation, as although we are not shippers, it's been said many times, we do bear the freight cost, but we don't pay them. So I think that's very important. I think it was good seeing Mark here today from Quorum, going through some of the statistics where we saw that, again, that we've had some logistical problems and continue to have them. So I think in our recommendations, we feel that a rail oversight group that includes agricultural producer representation to assess ongoing operations of the railroad. So really what we're looking for, I think, is we need to be able to match our production to what our customers' needs are. And presently there is no table where that's done, and we're asking one be made, and that we have a chair at that table. I think, again, I think we also need a responsive and meaningful dispute resolution mechanism that can resolve rate and service issues quickly and efficiently, and I think and costly as well. Terry Whiteside here today talked about the Surface Transportation Board, the 11-year process that they've gone to get them to where they are today. They look north and see some of the things that we've done here in Canada, and I think they're just going through a system down there which hopefully gives them some of the things that we're asking for here as well. So I guess we need to also establish provisions to enhance the use of running rights in Section 138 of the CTA. So we have to make sure that that's not a hollow right. Who's going to control those rights are some of the issues as well. And I think obviously a very important one is for producers is bringing Richard Gray in today to talk about the excess basis, and really that's dollars flowing out of our pockets, and I think that's very, very important. We see down in the States that excess basis is being taken up by the railroads, and up here it's being taken up by our grain handling companies. And I think as farmers, we're talking about increasing our output over the years. We've done a tremendous job of doing that through the decades, and we will want to continue to do that. And certainly we have other sectors as well that want to increase their output, so we need to make sure that we put farmers first and foremost and make sure that we try to keep some of those dollars in our jeans for a change, because it hasn't been so great. So I can assure you that at Sask Wheat and Barley and APAS, we're taking a leadership position to try to best farmers' interests in an area that we're too seldom taken for granted. So we certainly look forward to any coalition partners that want to join us, and I thank everyone for coming, and I'll hand it back to Norm.
Thanks, Bill. Just one more slide on principles and recommendations. Changes to the CTA need to support small shippers, shipper innovation, diversification, and investment. Now, we had a speaker here earlier today, Murad El-Khatib. He didn't start by shipping 67 or 69,000, whatever it was, shipping containers. He started small. How did our canola industry start? When it started, there was a few guys shipping producer cars of this funny-looking grain that was being produced on the prairies. Those were going out on producer cars. And then it went from there to small processing plants that maybe cleaned it before it went out. What about the pulse industry? Same thing. They started small. I think it was, wasn't it you, Terry, talking about these guys that grew lentils? These funny ducks. And how did that get started? It was the mom and pop cleaning organizations that started cleaning, loading producer cars, then loading small sidings, and going from there. So that is the innovation side of agriculture in Saskatchewan or Western Canada. What's the next crop that we're going to be starting with? Camelina, getting bigger maybe. Other crops, who knows what we're going to be growing? Who'd heard of canola or camelina or even lentils or dry peas? Anyway, we must ensure the unique requirements of producer car shippers and short lines in the transportation system are recognized. Mary Jane talked about when producer cars and the short lines were being held at ransom by the railroads, that all the grain was moving to market on pavement, and what effect did that have on the quality of our highways? And virtually everything south of the number 1 highway is served by short lines. And so that's an awful lot of grain to move by truck to the number 1 highway to mainline railroads. So we need to make sure those short lines are kept intact, because there's an awful lot of communities served by them. And it's not just southern Saskatchewan. There's short lines in Manitoba and Alberta as well. But Saskatchewan has the vast majority of them. I believe it's 14, and more on the way. And finally, the CTA needs to be empowered to investigate and rule on railways' genuine operational interests in unserviced and unused rail lines. There's a rail line between Tisdale and Hudson Bay that hasn't been used in a number of years. It hasn't been in use, but it's not discontinued. They did put it up for sale, and when there was lots of interest in it, then they decided, well, we better do a study to see if it's feasible or not. Study hasn't been released, and they haven't done anything with it. The grain that is hauled from that Tisdale, Melfort, and further north and west, going to Churchill, has to travel an extra 200 miles to get to Hudson Bay, as opposed to going across there. So Mark talked about the dollars per ton per mile, whether it's regulated or non-regulated, and going up to Churchill is non-regulated. So the railways are taking in extra money on that route instead of having a short line going across there and picking up grain as well. So I believe it was Bill talked, or Cam talked about this being a long process. We have to affect positive change for producers. We need to get it right because, as he said, 17 years is an awful long time to wait for it to happen again. So I will stop there, and we look forward to questions.
Thank you, Norm, Cam, and Bill. I spend a lot of time at meetings with these guys that are at the front, and I know that they devote an awful lot of their time to assisting farmers in the industry. Quite often the discussion in the industry is about growing the industry, but these folks ask the question, how does it benefit farmers? So that even a growth in the industry, if we're asked in the wheat industry to grow 43 million more metric tons per year, these guys are liable to ask you the question, how does that help farmers? So it's important, I think, to have their viewpoint. Now I'd like to open the floor for questions for these folks, or maybe more importantly, our suggestions for going forward. We presented some concepts and some ideas, but we'd like it if you could add to that, and either now or later let us know what you think we should, where we should be headed. Go ahead.
I'm Brock DeLanders from Kyle, Saskatchewan. I want to thank Saskatchewan Day Pass and Sask Barley. It was a very good day, very educational. It was excellent. I'm just curious as to why there was not more talk about direct competition and open running rights.
You want to do that one?
You can use the mic there if you like, Cam.
It's live too. Okay.
Part of the reason that it wasn't talked about very much is that everybody that we've talked to in the industry and government says it ain't going to happen. Now, it doesn't mean that we're not going to bring it up when we're actually talking, because as I said, this is a long process, possibly years, hopefully not, but certainly it's going to come up because they always talk about wanting competition, market power, and that is how you get market, not market power, but an open market is when you let anybody run on the rails. So to my mind, it is certainly a very valid way of looking at how you solve, some of the competition problems. But part of it is it's also extremely complicated, of course, and for that reason, when we are discussing it further down the road, there's going to have to be a lot of consideration given to how to make that work, to make sure the trains don't collide. Also, or do you just go with one railway going east, the other one coming west? How you share things like that. As I said, complicated, but it's certainly not off the table as far as I'm concerned, or the other participants in this forum. It's just that it seemed, as I said, people said, well, it's never going to happen, and also because of the how complicated it is, there was no point in trying to get into it in a short period of time.
Next question?
Hi.
Or comment? This could be a comment as well.
Well, comment. And first of all, thank you very much for the conference today. I'm from Manitoba, so Brandon, I had to fly in and everything. Yeah, I know. Don't worry, I'm not a Bombers fan. I live outside of Winnipeg. But anyways, so it's a very, very good discussion. And I think just recapping some of the comments, what I couldn't get over, Murad, it's the second time I heard about the industry working together, and I think this really proves it in spades, that just the number of people that are out in a growing season today. We all have a concern here right across this country, and especially in Western Canada, and I think we should keep on moving forward and keep on working together, no matter what our differences are, and we have strong opinions, as we heard today. But I think that's very, very important to keep this together as we move forward is that we will come up with a solution. We've always said a farmer does have a solution if you can get them focused on that long enough, besides looking at crops. So that's good. Greg Northey's comments on the road ahead. I don't know if anybody noticed that, but he was talking about 2018. I think we have just started a discussion. As an industry, we proved today that we are ready to move forward with this discussion and get this done and get it done right. I think that's another thing that we all have to be aware of, and I think we are. I think generally there's a good attitude towards this process moving forward. And then as far as moving forward, I know in our own organization, get ready with the election asks. Have a very well-defined of your candidates that are going to be coming forward to you in the next 30 to 60 days here. As we're driving around starting to take this crop off, what are you going to ask your MPs when they come around and ask for their support? That is probably the short-term goal right now for every farmer in Western Canada right now. What is their position on this transportation issue? So that's my comments.
I probably should have mentioned we have administrators with our organizations in the audience who are taking notes in case you don't see us recording what you're suggesting. So Cam might want to reply to that.
Yeah, I'd just like to, I guess thank you for that comment as far as it's up to farmers to make this an election issue, because when the three of us basically went to Ottawa at the end of April, that was the question every MP asked us. Is this going to be an election issue? Well, it's not going to be an election issue unless we make it one. Talk to your MPs. Certainly, we've been, when we were there, we did talk to every party. And it is critical that if we want, something to happen after this next election, regardless of what party it is, it's up to us to make sure that they know that this is incredibly important to us and also Canada in general.
Richard?
Yes, Richard Gray. I don't know whether we're wearing my farmer hat or the economist hat, but if we look at the maximum revenue entitlement, the railways, clearly there's some margin that they're going to be able to pay their shareholders. The more tons they move, there's $8 a ton or something extra going to the shareholders, which is good. But they get paid the same amount whether they move the same amount of grain over the full 12 months or whether they move some of it next year or the year after. As long as the quantity of grain doesn't change, they don't get paid any differently. And I'm thinking if we want them to increase in extra capacity, we actually have to pay them so they actually earn more money if they move the grain earlier, which means we should front-end load that maximum revenue entitlement so they get paid more for grain that moves in the fall, maybe even through to the end of February, rather than just say you get paid the same whether it moves the end of June or whether it moves the end of September. I think that's, if you want to incentivize, use the current system to incentivize that extra capacity. I think it's really important to start talking about incentives. It's one thing to say they should increase capacity, but give them some dollars to do it if that's what you want to do.
Mm-hmm. Someone from the panel want to comment on that? No. No? That's fair. Next question.
Dwayne Pilson, RM of Wood River. I've got a question, and don't get me wrong when I ask it, because I'm on the side of the angels in this discussion. But should we grow another gigantic bumper crop, which I suspect is going to happen before too long, how are you going to determine who gets to put their grain on a rail car and send it to the coast or wherever it's going to go to be sold, if not by price? Because that is what we've seen here, is that those who are willing to accept less for the grain have been able to ship their grain more quickly than those who want to get more for their grain. So it's been by price. And I suspect that is part of the reason why there are people who believe that the rail lines should be able to adjust their rates according to how much demand there is for their services. And it seems to me that if you don't allow that, in this present regime, because there is not the withholding ability that the wheat board used to have. The withholding ability of keeping grain back from the system is no longer there. What other determining factor is there than price?
I'll take a stab at that one, Dwayne. Let's go back to the 2013-14 year. The railways had a plan, and they made it open to everybody. 500,000 tons each per week going into the crop year. They hit that for a period of 2 or 3 weeks, the end of September, early October. That was their plan going forward. They let the grain companies know about that. The grain companies had one fault. They believed the railroads. So they started ordering their ships on that 1 million tons per week. And you can't just order up a ship with a week's notice. You're working 8 to 12, 16 weeks out to get a ship into port. So they did all this ordering. And then a couple of things happened. There was a derailment and a rock slide, and then all of a sudden November 1st it turned cold. And the first two, the rock slide and the derailment, or maybe those 2 derailments, put the railroads a little bit behind. And then the cold weather hit, and yeah, it was unseasonably cold. And so that knocked them down from that 450 to 500 to down to about 300,000 tons per week. All of a sudden, you're 40% short every week, and that just continued all the way through winter. But the grain companies had continued ordering their ships based on 1 million tons per week. And by the time they were able to start slowing those ships down coming into port, they already had 20 to 30 or more ships lined up going into the ports. And a lot of that grain that was going out that time of year was already contracted. So that had gone out, and of course not everybody contracts enough grain. And so guys were getting short on cash flow. They needed to start moving grain, so they started pushing the system, as they usually do. But with that push, the grain companies didn't need the grain, so they started lowering their basis. And we've heard examples of that Richard talked about. And it just became the lowest common denominator. How far down do you have to go, or how wide are your bases before those phone calls start slowing down? And that was where that came from. Now, to answer your question, Dwayne, who gets to put their grain on the ships or on the rail cars? I guess it depends on what kind of risk that you're willing to take. Are you willing to book 6, 8, 12, 16 months in advance to get your crop moved? If you're willing to take more risk, the shorter out you go. If you see a good price 16 months down, you book it. If you don't like it, you don't book it. It all depends on your risk, and that's it has been what has determined in an open market who gets to put their, or who sells their grain is all on price. And it's going to continue that way, because that's what we've got now, is open market.
Okay. Cam and Bill?
I guess one possible mechanism is what we have asked for is a logistical group that includes producers to help, basically determine how the rail system will work, not just in years of big crops, but all through the year, to make sure the maximum efficiency is recognized or used. And if you have producers on a board like that, they may be able to try to help allocate space, if you will, to various parts of the country where they know certain grains that are needed at port can be picked up. So I mean, I don't know that's going to happen. There may not even be a body like that, but that would be one possible function, depending upon how that body was formed and the powers that it were given, that may be able to to, you know, in some ways, even out the availability of rail space, transportation space for various parts of the Western Canada.
Bill?
Yeah, I guess further to that, our system has evolved over the years to move what we produce out over a year. So contrary to what some people believe, that we don't have to start our augers up in the winter, our customers eat 12 months a year. So we need to, like Cam said, and that's what the Railway Oversight Group would be, is to match our production to our customers' need, and that's paramount.
Okay, I think we can fit in 2 more comments, so that would be there and there.
Val Koskamaki, RM Grass Lake 381. We're looking at growing forward, but I think we need to look at growing outwards. We have more than one industry trying to use one avenue, which is the railroads. We've got potash, we've got grain, we've got oil and gas and everything. And I think building of the pipelines to take off the pressure of the oil and gas, we may not like it, but it is the obvious way to take off the pressure, to give back the capacity of the railroad back to the ag producers and the fertilizer producers. And so that I see that with elections coming up and everything, to be looking for representatives that would support everything, the production of pipelines and everything, to be able to have everybody to have a way of moving their product overall, because we just can't keep continuing to fight over just the one access to move a product that we have. We've got to all work together to get all the access points being worked through.
Okay, anybody want to respond?
Basically, you're right. I mean, it's not just one commodity. Everybody has to work together because of the limited capacity, and that's the whole really industrial complex of the country. So you're right. Everybody has to go together.
Okay, this will be the last comment or question.
Adam Warnock, I farm in the Battleford area. I guess I just wanted to add a little bit to this conversation. There's really not one thing that we can do to make this better. It's going to have to be a bunch of small things that come together to make a significant change. And some of the things I would have liked to hear a little more today are things such as scheduled service. I mean, trains run on timetables everywhere else in the world, to the minute. And I've ordered cars and had them show up months later, even though I got a phone call saying your cars are going to be here on Saturday. So I think that's a good first step. And I mean, that's something that would need to be reviewed weekly or monthly or quarterly or something like that. But we should start with a base level of service that every company, every location receives. Related to that is asset tracking. I mean, the technology's out there now where we should know where every locomotive, every car, every piece of equipment on that line is, where it is, what its status is, and that kind of comes together into knowing where everything is so it can be put to work properly. Another thing I think we need to be having a conversation about is all these old wooden elevators that are still on active lines with sidings. All of them that I know of have non-compete clauses on them. That needs to end yesterday. Especially, and not so much for companies to use, but I'm thinking for producer cars and co-ops like that. One of the avenues we have for keeping the basis levels honest is working outside the system whenever we can. And as it is right now, you know, dragging an auger over to the rail siding to load cars, it's doable, but it's rather inconvenient and leads to those cars normally sitting longer than they should be. Whereas if we have these elevators, you know, sitting with 3 or 4 cars of grain in them, bang, they're gone in 24 hours like they should be. So that's something that really needs to be looked at as well when making suggestions. The other thing I would like to mention, and I think the maintenance issue was brought up several times here, but I have some friends that operate trains, and I've heard stories of them sitting for 2 shifts trying to air up a train. Like, there should be regulations set in place that mandate, you know, at 25 degrees or whatever the temperature is, you only hook up to 75 cars or 60 cars or whatever. It needs to, it's directly related to the temperature, so that, you know, we aren't wasting days trying to air up a train that's not going to air up. So those are just a few of the suggestions that I have that, you know, weren't really talked about a whole lot that I think could contribute. So.
Good, thank you. I'd just like to mention a couple or a few housekeeping items before we ask Norm to sum up the day. Please complete the evaluation form that we have and leave them on the registration table. Winners of the Tim Horton gift cards will be notified by email or phone. Please leave your name tags, necklaces on the registration table so we can recycle them. If you have feedback for our respective boards or staff, please let us know. Today doesn't have to end the discussion. All the presentations from today will be available at the APAS website, www.apas.ca. Remind you that Sask Wheat and Sask Barley have elections coming up this fall. You can visit our respective websites for timelines, nominations, and voting information. We appreciate everyone being with us today for an important issue, and hopefully we can make improvements in the future. So now I'd like to call on Norm Hall to close the session. Norm?
Thanks, Dan. I just want to make a couple comments on the last comments. You talked about spending 2 days airing up a train. Now, the trucking industry has that solved. They know how to keep air in their brake systems. The railways have been using a very similar brake system for almost 100 years. And they haven't figured this one out yet, that in Canada it gets cold in the winter. They need to have some sort of better system. So there is that. And on your non-competition clause, that's between the owner of the grain, or of the elevator, and the grain company. It has nothing to do with rail. Now I'll get on to my task. First off, I want to thank Sask Wheat, Sask Barley, and Sask Pulse for the cooperation that was put forward into submitting this, or putting together our submission that went to the CTA Review Committee. It's unprecedented that these groups have worked together and we've talked about working together. Dan Mazur brought it up, that we need to continue working together. The 3 Prairie Farm organizations have been working together for a number of years to bring our voice forward on the national scene. When this came out back in October of 2013, we started making calls to Ottawa because we were going there in February, and we wanted to meet with Lisa Raitt, Transport Minister. We met with her. We met with Jerry Ritz. We met with opposition politicians as well. And I want to thank you, the farmers of this province, because it is your money that put this together. Sask Wheat, Sask Barley, and APAS. Your levies to wheat and barley, and your membership fees to APAS put this on. So thank you very much for trusting us, and I hope you'll agree that it was money well spent. couple plugs. Mark Hemis talked about the good MRE report that was written by Steve Pratt. That was written for the Crop Logistics Working Group. Mark and I, Dan Mazer, and, well, Steve Pratt and Greg Northey all sit on the Crop Logistics Working Group. And a number of us sat on the MRE committee, subcommittee, and when we put our submission forward, we said that there would be an MRE submission following, and that happened. Minister Ritz acknowledged acceptance of our report today in Winnipeg, and as Murad said, we will be meeting with David Emerson and Murad here in Saskatoon on July 30th. And the Crop Logistics Working Group submission, as well as the MRE submission, is on the APAS website. Go to Advocacy, Transportation, and it's under that tab. Dan said that today's proceedings are on the APAS website, but they'll also be on Sask Wheat and Sask Barley. They are running live on apas.ca right now. So if you're bored on the drive home, you can re-watch it again. Don't do it though. Apparently it's illegal. APAS has been talking to our federal parties about this and a number of other issues, and what we've said, what I said to Minister Ritz, is we're asking for this meeting with you because when the writ is dropped, I'm going to be too damn busy to talk to you. So let's talk in July or August before we get on the combines. I guess that's it. Thank you very much for coming out, taking your time on a very important issue. And APAS is holding its midterm meeting tomorrow. So I would ask that the districts get together with your directors, and we'll talk about issues that need to be talked about tonight, whether it's over supper or whatever, but get together with your directors and have a conversation about that. For everybody else, have a safe trip home. Thank you for coming out, and keep this on the top of your minds. Thank you.
Thanks, Norm. That concludes our day, and thanks everybody for their contribution. As it's been said before, drive home safely. Good luck with harvest. Enjoy the rest of the summer season with family and friends, and I hereby adjourn the meeting.